Okay. Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well. So in this video, I will quickly go over Lab 5A and 5B, which is for the repetition unit. And it is one of the most important units. I mean, you just have two new units for your final exam, which is Unit 5 and Unit 6. So both of them have equal weightage. But Unit 6 also depends on your knowledge from Unit 5. So it's very important that you understand these labs well, or the concept of repetition well. So I'll start with the first question. Here it says write a Java method, and like we've mentioned before, if the question says that you need to write a method, do not write any class. Do not create a class and do not create a main method, because we've already created that for you. So if you also create those, it then conflicts with your answer, even though your answer may be fully correct. So we create a method called simple while loop. This is the name of the method, and you need to use the while loop to print numbers from 1 to 10 in ascending order. Ascending means small to large. And then you can assume that the scanner package has been imported for you, so you do not need to write the import statement. And they've also given you a flow chart that you can use to create the code, or to write the code. So if we look at the flow chart, it says after the program starts, what it should do is it should declare an integer variable called num, and the value for num should be 1. And then you start a loop. How do we know it is a loop? Because there's a condition and then an arrow that gets back to this condition. So any arrow that goes back to a condition, it is representing a loop, or it represents repetition. So in this case, we're checking if number is less than or equal to 10. In the case that your number, the value of which initially is 1, if it is less than or equal to 10, what you do is you print the number and you increment the number by 1, and then you go back and check again. So this time the number becomes 2, and 2 is still less than or equal to 10. So in that case, again, you print the number and you increment the number by 1, which makes it to 3. You continue that until the value of num is greater than 10. Because if it is equal to 10, it will still print the number and it will still increment it, which will make the number 11. And at that point, if the condition becomes false, what happens is you stop the loop and you end the program. So if we were to write this, we would write it this way: public static. We're not returning anything because the questions doesn't state anything about return, or it doesn't use the word return, so we don't need to return anything. And in that case, we would have void. Okay, and then you you paste the name of the method, which is simple while loop. Does it take any parameters? No, it doesn't mention anything about parameters. And if you see the test as well, there are no parameters because the brackets are empty. So in that case, we leave the parameters empty. Now within the method, you need to loop, and then you need to print numbers from 1 to 10, I believe. Yes, 1 to 10. So they mentioned here in the beginning in the flowchart that you need to create an integer called num, give it a value of 1. While this num variable, or this num variable is less than or equal to 10, because we want it to start from 1 and we want it to end at 10. So any number which is less than or equal to 10 is okay. As soon as the number becomes greater than 10, that's when we stop. Okay, so within this while loop, you would write system.out.println num. This will print the number for you. Initially, when num is 1, it will check, okay, is 1 less than or equal to 10? It is. So you print 1, and then you need to go to the next number, which is 2. So for that, you increment the number by 1. You can either write it plus plus num or num plus plus. It's the same in terms of loops. And if you forget to change, or if you forget to increment num, what will happen is this will become an infinite loop. What that means is it will never stop, because in the beginning the value of num is 1 and 1 is less than or equal to 10, which is correct, and you print 1, but then you never change it to 2, so it will always stay 1, and this condition will always be true, and therefore you'll always print 1. I'll show it to you as well so it becomes more clear. So let's check. Wait for it. The reason it's taking too long is because it's an infinite loop. And if you see, it just keeps printing 1, 1, 1 until the very end. It's really long. I'll not scroll to the very end. But there's also another issue here. It says your solution must use the required word final. Why do we do that? It's because any number that you directly write in a condition should be created as a constant. This is just a professional practice so that your code is easier to manage. So instead of directly writing 10 here, what should have been done was to create a constant. So final int, I will call it limit, and if you remember, constants are written in all capital letters, should be equal to 10. And then instead of writing 10 here, I will write limit, and then get rid of this, check again, and this time it should print numbers from 1 to 10. And you just need to write your comments. So you can say this is the counter, this is the limit. I'm just writing small comments because I don't have time. Print the value, and then increment the value. By value, I mean the value stored in the num variable. Okay, now it should be fine. Yeah, okay. So that is how you would do it with a while loop. Now the same thing we can do it with a do while loop. So I will copy this and then I will paste it here. I'll use the same loop. For you, see, I know how to do this. That's why for me, I can copy paste it, correct? But for you, since you're new to the language, I do not recommend copy pasting anything because you will not learn. The only way to learning how to code is by making mistakes, and you can only make mistakes when you're actually typing things. If you're just copy pasting, then you will not become a good programmer. I mean, you can copy paste things once you get to a intermediate level, I would say, but in the beginner's level, please try to write it from scratch. So here we have the method public static void. The name of the method is simple do while, so I'll copy that here. And you need to use the do while loop to print numbers from 1 to 10. So the only thing we need to change is this loop was written using while. We need to write the loop using do while. If you remember, in do while, the condition is at the end, okay? And after the condition, we put a semicolon. And in the beginning, to signify that this is a loop, you use the keyword do, okay? So this makes it a do while loop. So if we check this, it should print numbers from 1 to 10. That was it. The only difference between while loop and do while loop is that while loop has a condition in the beginning. There is no semicolon next to while. But then in do while, the loop starts from do, and the condition is at the end of the loop, followed by a semicolon, okay? So that's the second question. The third question, write a Java method using the for loop to print numbers from 1 to 10. So I'll just write it so you can follow the same approach. So the name of the method is public static void, because we're not returning anything. Simple for loop, and you need to print numbers from 1 to 10. So the same approach, I will create a limit first. So final int limit is equal to 10. And then with for loop, if you notice, with while loop and do while loop, we created the counter, or the number that we were using in the loop, we created it outside the loop. With for loop, you don't need to create it outside. You can just create it within the loop itself. So it will be int num is equal to 0. Num should be less than or equal to limit, and then plus plus num. Okay, so this means, oh, actually it should start from 1. Okay, so you start from 1, make sure it is less than the limit, which is 10, and then after every iteration or after every loop, increment the value by 1. And then you need to just print system.out.println, which is num. Here the initialization and the increment both are written next to the for statement. With while loop and do while loop, you have the initialization outside and increment within the loop. Okay, that's the only difference. If you notice these patterns, it's easy to remember how to write the different loops. Okay, oh, I need to comment. So this is the limit. This is loop to print numbers 1 to 10, printing the value. I hope it is enough. Okay, so we're done with the third question. Now for the fourth question, it says write a simple do while loop that takes an upper limit as a parameter. See, now we have the word parameter, and if you notice the test, we have something within the brackets as well. This is the parameter. Now using the do while loop, you need to print numbers from 1 to whatever this number is. So start from 1 and then until this number that is mentioned as the parameter. I'll copy the do while loop from here, and then we'll just change it. Now see, here we had the limit 10, right? We created that limit because the question said we need to print numbers from 1 to 10. But here we get the limit as a parameter. So you can write int limit here, get rid of this limit, and then change this to limit. Okay, because now we're getting the limit from the parameter, which I've written here. See, here we have the number 10, right? We need to capture it somehow, so we create an integer called limit, and then we can use that limit instead of the constant that we had before. That's the only difference in this code. Okay, so if we click on check, it is correct. Okay, that's the fourth question. The fifth question is, now I must say these questions are too easy, so don't expect these kind of questions in the exam. These are just to introduce you to the concept of loops. Okay, so the fifth question says write a Java method simple for loop that takes an upper limit as a parameter. See, now again we have a parameter, and if you look at the test, again there is a number written within the brackets, which is the parameter. And you need to use the for loop to print the numbers from 1 until this number, whatever this number is. If it's 1, if it's 10, you print until 10. If it's 100, you print until 100. I will copy the for loop from here, and then we just make the necessary changes. So here now in the test we have a parameter, so we need to capture that. So int limit is what I would call it. We do not need this limit anymore because it's coming now from the parameter, and just change this limit to be the same as the parameter. Sorry. And now if we check, it should work. Yes, it is fine. Now if it's 10, it's printing until 10. If it's 5, it's printing until 5. Alright, now the last one I think is for the while loop. Write a Java method simple while loop that takes an upper limit as parameter. Again, this is the parameter, use the while loop. Now I think we wrote it here, right? Yeah, I will copy this, go to the sixth question, paste it. Simple while loop is what it is called. You need to use the while loop, no need for the limit anymore because it's coming from the parameter. The reason I'm not capitalizing this is because this is not a constant, right? So we only write capital for constants. So since this is a normal variable, you need to write it as the convention for variables. Oops, this one is num and this one is limit. Okay, now if you click on check, it should work. Yes, again, if it's 10, it's printing until 10. If it's 5, it's printing until 5. Okay, now write a method sum of even. that reads a set of integers one at a time and then prints the sum of the even integers. The loop terminates when the value of 0 is entered. Add the numbers entered to the sum if they are even at the, okay, let's break it down. What you need to do is, when this method is called sum of even, notice it has no parameters and the method doesn't say anything about return as well. When you call this method, what happens is it starts prompting you for numbers. Okay, so it asks you for a number, you give it 1. Again, it asks you for another number, you give it 2. It asks you for another number, you give it 3. You can give any number. I'm just talking about the tests that they have shown here. It will keep asking you for a number until you enter 0. The minute you enter 0, what happens is the prompt stops. It stops asking you for a number, and then it prints for you the sum of all the even numbers that you provided. So all the even numbers in this list, how many ever even numbers are there, it will add them up, and at the end, when you press 0, it will print that sum for you, the sum of all the even numbers. Now the hint that they've mentioned is, when you read a number from the user, for example, if it is 1, I can check at that same moment if this is odd or even. If it is odd, skip everything, go and ask for another number. If it is an even, what you do is, what I mean is, if it's an even number, for example, 2 is an even number, right? So you check if it's an even number, then you add it to a sum variable. So as long as you keep getting numbers, you keep adding all the even numbers to a variable called sum, and at the end you print out its result. Okay, let's see how to do that. Now public static is what we always write, void because return is not mentioned in the question, and then the name of the method is sum of even. Okay, this is the method name. Now we've seen 3 kinds of loops, right? For loop, while loop, and do while loop. Now there are different situations in which we use different kinds of loop. For example, if you know how many times you want to loop, you will use the for loop. If you don't know how many times you are going to loop, you will either use while loop or do while loop. If you use the while loop, if you use the while loop, what happens is the condition is checked in the beginning. Okay, and if you use a do while loop, the condition is checked at the end. That is the difference. For loop, you should know how many times you're looping. For while loop and do while loop, it's not, you use it when you don't know how many times you're going to loop. But the difference between while loop and do while loop is, while loop checks the condition in the beginning because you write the condition in the beginning, and then do while loop checks the condition at the end. Now here, how do we choose which one? We don't know how many numbers the user is going to give us, or we don't know in this situation when the user is going to enter 0. So in this case, we do not know how many times we're going to loop. So now our choices are limited between while loop and do while loop. For loop is out of question because in this case we don't know how many times to loop. Okay, now between do while loop and while loop, which one to choose? Now when you start the loop, you don't have the value to check, right? When you start the loop, the first time that you get the value is when you are within the loop, right? You don't get the value before starting the loop. What I mean is, this value that the user is going to give you, you will only get it once you are in the loop. These statements that are repeating signify that this is a loop, right? You will only get the value once you are in the loop. In this case, use the do while loop, because the condition should be at the end, since we don't have the value in the beginning. But if you had the value in the beginning, go for the while loop. Okay, in your exam, you can choose whatever loop you want, as long as it works. That's what we want, but make sure that you know the differences going forward. Okay, so here we will use the do while loop. Okay, now we need to keep track of this sum, right? So I'll create a sum variable in the beginning and assign it 0. Anytime you're keeping track of sum, the initial value will always be 0. Anytime you're keeping track of product, which means multiplied result, the initial value will be 1, because if you keep it as 0 for multiplication, anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So for sum, always it's 0. For multiplication, it's always 1. Now int sum is equal to 0, and then we start our loop. Since we're reading input from the user, we need scanner as well. So I'll create scanner input is equal to new scanner system.in. Okay, and then I can prompt the user. I can say system.out.println, enter a number and 0 to quit, because this statement is the one that's repeating. That's why it should be within the within the loop. Sorry. Now I can read the value. I can say int num is equal to input dot next int. Okay, this reads the number from the user. We store it in int num. You can even create int num outside. It's up to you. You can create it within the loop, up to you. Actually, no. In this case, we might need to create it outside because we're using it in the while loop condition. Okay, so okay, let's create it outside so it's easier. Int num is equal to 0. Okay, and then here we get the value for num, and then we check if num modulus 2. If you remember, anything divided by 2, if it is 0, then it's an even number. Anything modulus 2, if it gives you 0, that means it's an even number. If it is not equal to 0, that means it's an odd number. So if it is equal to 0, then we add it to sum. We say sum is equal to sum plus num. That means take the old value of sum, take this number, add them up, and then store it back in sum. So initially sum is 0. So 0 plus, in this case, the first input is 1. So 0 plus 1 will be 1, and that will be stored in 1. Sorry, no, my bad. 1 is not even, right? So for any even number, for example, here 2 is the even number. So it will take 0 plus 2, it makes it 2. So you store 2 in the sum variable. If it is odd, we don't do anything, and we keep looping until num is not equal to 0. As soon as num is equal to 0, we stop looping, and then outside you have to print out the sum. System.out.println. I will copy this statement so I don't make any spelling mistakes. Remove 30 and add sum. Okay, now we will have to comment. So this is to keep track of sum, to store input, to read input, prompt result. Okay, check. Okay, and it works. Okay, so it reads all the number. Anytime it is an even number, it takes the sum and it adds to the sum and it stores the sum, and it will keep looping as long as number is not equal to 0. Okay, and finally for the odd, it's the same one. I will just copy it and change it to sum of odd, and this time we will make sure that it is odd. So if it is not equal to 0, that means it's an odd number, and then you need to write sum of odd numbers is sum. So it's just about keeping track of the pattern, knowing the correct conditions and knowing how to put them together, which is how you learn how to program. Okay, so if you check this, okay, there's a mistake. Okay, this sometimes it happens. I've made sure for the most part that it doesn't happen in your exam, but for example here I've used do, but it's looking for something like this. So if it ever shows you this, try to write it. It's looking for this do loop, but there's a space issue basically. So if you check now, okay, and that's it. Okay, that's lab 5A. Now we'll quickly go to lab 5B and see how to do this. This is a much more advanced version. So here you have a question that says you're planning a holiday in Europe, all of that. You need to write a program. So in this case, you need to write the program. So you need to create the class, you need to create the main method, you need to write the import statements. And you need to write a program which will convert BD amount to euros. So you keep asking from the user an amount which is in dinar, Bahraini dinar, and you convert it to euros, and you keep asking the user until they provide minus 99 as the input. So you stop as soon as it becomes minus, the value that they enter is minus 99. Also, you need to format the value to 2 decimal places, and you need to, your output should match the result here. So basically, write the whole program. I will call it public class converter. Okay, and since we're writing a class, we need to write the main method as well. So public static void main string brackets arguments. If you've done unit 6, you know that this is a string array. Okay, and since we need input, we need to import java.util.scanner. Okay, now we start with our code. We need to read the what is it called? Oh, we need a decimal format as well. So import java.text.decimal format. Okay, so you need to read from the user, so you need a scanner. So scanner input is equal to new scanner system.in, and then we need decimal format for formatting the final output. So decimal format fmt is equal to new decimal format, and then you need to specify the formatting. So here they want it to be 2 decimal places, and they say that if the final result was 1.500, you need to omit these 2 zeros. If it was 200,000, no need to print the zeros. So if you see, the zeros are being omitted, right? So if you want to omit zeros, you need to write hash. Okay, if you want the zeros to be printed, then you write 0. Okay, so here it would be 0 because I want that number to be printed even if it is 0, and then hash. If those numbers are 0, skip them. If they are not 0, then print them. Okay, that is decimal format. Then again, the loop is very similar to what we wrote just before this question. It will be a do while loop. Why? Because we don't know at what point the user is going to give you minus 99, and the first value will come once you're within the loop. So you don't know the value before you loop, right? So you can't check it before you start the loop. So you loop until you get the amount to be, if the amount is not equal to minus 99. As soon as it is minus 99, we want to stop the loop. Now amount is not created, right? So I need to create amount. Now what will be amount? If you notice here, it is 1.5. The value that the user is giving you is 1.5, and we know that if it's with decimal values, you need to use the double data type. So double amount is equal to 0. Initially it is 0. Now within the loop, within the result, if you notice, this statement does not repeat. The only statement that's repeating is this one: please enter amount, please enter amount. So this is the statement that will be put within the loop. And this statement, you can keep it outside the loop. So here I can print out system.out.println, okay, and then within the loop I need to prompt the user with this statement. So system.out.println, and then read the amount from the user. So amount is equal to input dot, because it's double, next double. Okay, this will read the amount. Now you need to convert it to euros so you can print it, right? So I will use double euros is equal to, and if you notice, they've given you the formula as well. 1 BD is the same as 1.85 euros. So euros is amount times 1.85. Okay, now you need to, every time the user gives you a value, you need to print out its equivalent, right? So I will copy this and I will use it in the print statement here, system.out.println. Now this one, BD 1.5, I will use it as the amount. Amount is the one that is in dinars, and it is in, we need to format it, right? So if it is 1.500, you need to only show 1.5. So to format it, you will write fmt.format and surround the value in the brackets. Okay, same for the euros value as well. So because it's between the text, you have to close the text, put 2 plus, and then fmt dot format euros. Okay, and semicolon at the end. Just close this. Yeah, I think this should be fine. Oh, the comments. Okay, anyway, I think the code, okay, see what's happening here. This is correct, this is correct, this is also correct, this is also correct, but when the user gives me minus 99, I'm still printing out the equivalent, which shouldn't happen. It should just stop as soon as I give it minus 99. So what we can do here is we can add another check. I can say if amount is not equal to minus 99, then do the calculation. Otherwise, no need to do the calculation. Okay, so now I think it should work. Let's see. Okay, the only thing that was happening was when it got minus 99, it was also doing the conversion and also printing it. We don't want that, right? So I just added another check to make sure it's not minus 99. Only then we print out the conversion and the result. Okay, now that's question 1. Question 2 is update the program from question 1, but use 2 methods. The first one is convert and the second one is convert to euro. This is to start the method, and then this one is to actually do the conversion. It gets the amount in BD as a parameter and it returns the amount in euros. You can assume that both the classes are already imported for you. So I will copy the whole thing from here, okay, and then I will paste it within the method that says it starts the program. Okay, now this method is responsible for starting the program and reading the input and providing the whole input, right? The actual calculation is happening here, correct? So I will copy these 2 lines. No, actually the calculation is only this much. So I'll copy this line, paste it here, and then we don't even need this. I can just remove this and I can say return BD, because now there's no amount, there's only BD. So I have to use BD here. return BD times this, and I can just call double euros is equal to convert to euro and provide the amount. Okay, whatever is the value, it will be stored in euros and then printed out the same way. Let's see if this is correct. Okay, what's the issue? What's the issue? Okay, there's a space after printing the euros. So after printing the euro value, there's a space. Okay, and I feel like this is not formatted correctly. Okay, so now where's the button? Yes, check. Okay, now it's correct. Okay, so the only thing was this calculation, we moved it here, and the value that it returned, we stored it in euros. It was just one line of code. I don't know why it needed to be written like this, but anyway. Okay, the third one, and this is an interesting question. It says that there's a group of students that are in a class. So for example, assume that you are in a class of students and there are about 20 students, okay, and the teacher says get into groups of 5. How would you divide? How many groups would there be? What you would do is you would divide the number of students by the number of students that should be in the group. So 20 divided by 5, 20 is the number of students, 5 is how many students per group. You will have 4 groups, right? That's the whole thing you need to do. And you also need to figure out how many students are left without groups. That means if you had 22 students and you needed to be in a group of 5 each, then you have 4 groups, but then 2 students are left without a group. Okay, so you need to do all of this through a program. You need to write a program for it, but in this case you need to include input validation, which means only allow the input that is correct. If the user is giving you wrong input, ask them again. This is similar to when you go to an ATM, for example, and you put your card and you put a wrong PIN number. Not just ATM, any machine. For example, if you try to log into your phone as well, you put the wrong code, it doesn't stop there. It asks you for the correct code again, right? It tells you the code that you've provided is wrong. Please enter the correct code. It gives you another chance. That's exactly what we're trying to incorporate here. One new thing that is added here is you need to assume that the program already imports the scanner package and it has already created a scanner object for you, which is called input. So you do not need to create any scanner object. What you need to do is you need to create 3 methods: form groups, enter team size, and calculate number of teams. Form groups gets the number of students from the user. So you're prompting the user and you will return. See, now you need to return something. You will return the total number of students in the class. This method is responsible for reading how many students are in the class. Okay, and this number should be positive. It shouldn't be 0, it shouldn't be less than 0. If the user gives you 0 or a number less than 0, you tell them it is a wrong number, please enter the correct value again. Okay, so we'll start with the first one, which is form groups. So public static. Now here we need to return something. If you notice, it says return, right? And the number of students will never be a decimal. It will always be a whole number, right? So we can consider that we need to return a number and the data type of that number would be int. This is the name of the method. We're not taking any parameters because it doesn't say anything about parameters. It just mentions the return. Now you need to prompt the user using this statement. See how many students are in the group. If they give you 0 or a value less than 0, you tell them, oh, error, it should be positive, and you ask them again for a number. If they give you a positive number, then you stop. If they give you a correct value, then you stop. Otherwise, you keep asking them again. So I'll copy this and see, we need to return something, right? So we need to create a variable to store that value. I'll create a variable called students. Initially, I will give it a value of 0. Okay, And then we need to also return students. The reason I gave it a value is because I'm trying to return the same variable, and if you're using a variable in return statement, it has to be initialized, which means it should have an initial value. Now if we look at this case, we don't know how many times we are going to loop, because we don't know how many times we're going to get a wrong value from the user. Okay, and the value is also coming from the user, the one that we're using to check how many times we need to repeat. So the best solution is to use the do while loop, and the condition for the while loop should be that the value that you get from the user should not be as long as it is negative, as long as it is not positive. Okay, as long as the value of students is not positive. I'll write that in a minute, but for now let's prompt the user. So system.out.println, this is the prompt. Okay, and then you read from the user. If you remember, it said that input scanner is created for you, so you can say input dot next int will give you the value that the user inputs from the keyboard, and then you store it in students. Okay, now what do you need to check? You need to check if this is positive. So if students, if this is not positive, then you need to print the error, right? If the user gave you 0 or any value less than 0, that's when we tell them about the error. So students, if it is less than or equal to 0, you can even write if it is less than 1, whatever suits you. If this is correct, then in this case I can write the error statement, system.out.println, like this. Okay, now the thing is, here for input validation, even if you go through the slides, there is one thing that we've added. I mean, you don't have to use it, but this is like a standard approach. We use something called Boolean flag, or you can say Boolean exit. Initially you make it false. Okay, you can set a Boolean initially as false. Okay, now if the value is correct, so if in this case the value is still negative, right, it's either 0 or it's negative. In this case we print the error and we want to repeat. But if it is not negative, that means in this, so this case is 0 or negative. Okay, and this else case would then be positive. Correct? If it is positive, we want to exit, so we make exit true, and the condition we write here would be not exit, or you can write it as exit is equal to false. It's the same thing. Either exit is equal to false or not exit. Why do we do that? Just to keep track of when we should exit the loop. Instead of writing the condition multiple times, what you can do is you can create a Boolean to make sure whether or not to exit the loop or not. If it is the wrong value, you print out the error and you repeat again. At some point you change the Boolean to true, and as soon as the Boolean changes to true, this condition becomes false, because now exit is not false, exit is true. But if exit was false, you would still repeat, because this condition becomes true. Correct? It's a bit confusing because we're using false and true in the same instance, but as you practice, it will make more sense. This is the step. You create a Boolean, you give it false in the beginning. The condition for the loop is exit is equal to false, whatever is the name of the Boolean, is equal to false, or you can even write it as like this, not exit. Okay, it's the same thing. Somewhere in your loop, when the input is correct, you change the exit to true, because if you don't change exit to true, it will always be false and the loop will never end. Okay, so that is form groups. Now I can't check it because I need to write the other methods as well, so I'll just carry on. Now for the next one, you need to prompt the user for the team size. So this means how many students in a team. You need to ask that. And if you read the question, it says that there should be at least 2 people per team and the maximum of 5. So you can have either 2 people in a team or 5 people in a team, not more than that. So the user will either enter 2, 3, 4, 5, not more than that. Okay. And then again, input validation. And then we need to return the size of the team as well. So I will copy this and then create here only public static int, because we need to return the size. This is the name of the method. And then just like here, when we created a students variable to store the number of students, here we need to create a size variable to store the number of size, the team size, and then finally return it at the end. Within these 2 lines of code, you need to write your code. Again, we don't know how many times we have to repeat, because in the beginning, for example, here it asks the user how many students should be in a team. It says 6. 6 is not allowed. It should either be 2, 3, 4, or 5. So you print error, team size should be between 2 and 5. The next time you ask the user again, and this time they give you the value 4, which is between 2 and 5. So you stop looping and you return this value. So here again, we will use a boolean to control the exit or to control the loop. So I will call it exit is equal to false. We need to start the do while, because we don't know how many times we need to repeat, and we don't know the value before entering the loop. So here I will prompt the user system.out.println and then read the input using the input scanner. Now the condition here will be if the size is either less than 2 or it is greater than 5. If it is less than 2, meaning it's 1, 0, -1, whatever, or it is more than 5, which is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In this case, we need to print out our error. So system.out.println, this is the error. If it is not true, if this condition is not true, that means the value is either between 2 and 5. It's either 2, 3, 4, or 5, right? So in this case, the value is correct, and so we set exit to true, and this condition will be exit is equal to false. It's the same approach, just the condition is different and the prompt is different. So that is how we would create the size. This is for storing team size prompt. I'm just writing comments so I don't have to think about it later. And then return size. Okay, now the last one is calculate NB teams. This is for actually calculating how many teams will be there. Now it takes the number of students and team size as parameters. So if you notice, there are 2 values that are being passed. These are the parameters, and you need to just print out the message, how many teams will be there and how many students without teams. So I will write it here, public static. We're not returning anything. If you read the statement, it doesn't use the word return, so no need to return anything. Void calculate number of teams. We're taking 2 values. This is number of students, this is how many team members in a team. So int students, int size. Okay, and then you need to calculate how many teams. So int teams is equal to students divided by size. If you are 20, if there are 20 students in a class and 5 members per team, 20 divided by 5, 4 teams. How many left? You can use the modulus operator to find out how many students are left without teams. The same equation, just with modulus. And then you just print out these 2 statements. Okay, so system.out.println, remove 3, 2 brackets, 2 quotations, 2 plus, and then teams, and then system.out.println. These are how many students there will be without no teams. So this is for left, how many students are left. So number of teams, students left, print teams, print left. Okay, check. Okay, and it works. So that's how you would do this question. Again, it's an important question for you to understand the input validation. Okay. Now the fourth one is write a method menu which will prompt the user to enter a password. The password should be hard-coded. This is your password. If the password is not correct, error message is displayed and the user is prompted again. This is like how any normal password system works. If the password is wrong, you tell the user that it's wrong and you ask for them again. From them the password again. If the password is correct, a menu of 4 choices is displayed. If the user enters a number between 1 and 4, a message is displayed to show which choice was entered and the program exits. If a number outside the range is entered, error message is displayed. Use a boolean to control the loop. Boolean to control the loop is the same as this one, where we created a boolean and the condition is a boolean as well. Okay, so what is it? A method? Yes. So public static void menu. Void because it says nothing is returned and it doesn't say anything about parameters as well. Here also the brackets are empty. So that's how we write the method. Now you have to prompt the user for the message. So here the correct password should be stored as a constant. So correct pass is this. Okay, you need to loop to ask the user for the correct password. Okay, so I would use boolean correct, or I can say pass exit is false in the beginning, and then we start our loop. So while pass exit is equal to false. Okay, now here you need to prompt the user for the password. So again, I think we need to create a scanner here. So scanner input is equal to new scanner system.in, and then here you prompt the user system.out.println, enter the password. Okay, string password is equal to the one that the user gives you, so input dot next, and then you check if the password that the user gave you is the same as, so equals the correct pass. Okay, if it's the same as correct password, then pass exit becomes true. Okay, then we need to leave. Otherwise we need to print for the user that, oh, your password is incorrect, and then ask for the password again. So system.out.println incorrect password. Now if the password was correct, in this case the user gave you the correct password, you need to print out these choices, correct, and then whatever the user chooses, you print out their choice, the one that they gave you. So that we can do it this way. I can copy this. So if the password is correct, you print for the user, system.out.println all of these choices. I can just put the new line symbol, so all of them are printed in the, so I can put all of them in the same line. Okay, and then semicolon at the end. You read from the user their choice, and the choice is a number. So int choice is equal to the one that the user gives you. So next int using the scanner object. Now you need to check if this choice has the number between 1 to 4. If it is 1 to 4, then it's valid, otherwise it's not valid. So you will print out you have entered an invalid choice. But in this case it will be if choice is either less than 1 and sorry, no, my bad, if it is less than 1 or if it is greater than 4. In this case we need to print out the error, you have entered an invalid choice. Otherwise we print out you have entered choice and then the choice number. So system.out.println you have entered choice, remove choice, choice. Okay, and I think it should work. I think it will tell me to add comments, but let's see. Yes, so this is for to read input to control loop, correct password, prompt user, read and store password, prompt read and store choice, prompt choice, wrong password, wrong choice. I think this should be it. Okay, that's how you need to code this. Again, if you notice the same pattern, somewhere you change the boolean to true, initially it's false, and the condition is whatever the boolean is equal to false. Okay, so that's the fourth question. The fifth question, amend the flowchart. We're not doing flowchart, this is up to you. You have to be doing this in your own time. Change the code for the fourth question. Change the menu option 4 to exit. If the password is incorrect, the user should be repeatedly asked for the correct password. When the password is correct, we want to repeatedly display the menu. And display the menu in the following cases. If the user enters 1 to 3, if the user enters an invalid number, choosing 4 will exit the program, which means the program should end. Use 2 booleans, one for the first loop and one for the second loop. It's literally the same code with some changes. So I will paste it here. Now we have one loop for the password. We need to create another boolean for menu exit, because the menu that we're going to display will also become like it will also loop as long as the user gives you these 3 choices or the user gives you any wrong choice. In that case you need to keep printing the choices. If the user gives you 4, that's when you exit. Okay, so this whole thing needs to repeat as well. Okay, this is the menu and you keep repeating this menu. So I will put this in a do while loop. We'll remove it from here. Okay, and put it in a do while loop. While not, or you can just say menu exit is equal to false. Okay, now as long as the choice is okay, let's see how we can change this. This is the choice menu. You read the choice, you entered the choice. If the choice is less than 1 or if it is greater than 4, that means you need to enter the value is invalid. Else, if the choice was equal to 4, in this case we want to exit. So we make menu exit is equal to true. Okay, this statement we only print if the value is between 1 and 3. So else this stays, but we only exit when the choice is 4, and 4 choice is now called exit. Okay, so if we check this, it works. Okay, so the only thing we did was we put the whole thing in a do while loop. We created another boolean to control this loop. We made sure the invalid choice is covered. If the choice was 4, then you want to exit, right? You don't want to loop again, so you make the exit true, and then otherwise you just print the choice. This means the else statement will work for choices that are 1, 2, 3. If it is 4, it will just exit. If it is anything other than 1 to 4, it will print out invalid choice. Okay, use a method products to use a for loop to calculate the product of integers 2 to 8 inclusive. Inclusive means 2 and 8 are also counted. Okay, given the parameters, these are the parameters that are given: start value and then stop value. The final value should be displayed. You need to display the value. There's no return. So the method would look something like this: public static void, name of the method, and then int start value, int stop value. Okay, because you're provided these two values, int start value and int stop value. Okay, and if you notice here, you have two values as well. So this is this is the start value, and then this is the stop value. Now for int, I'll call it num is equal to start value, because that's where you want to start. Num should be less than or equal to stop value. Why did I choose equal to? Because it says inclusive in the question. If it was not inclusive, you don't put the equal to. And then add 1 every single time to num, and you need to keep track of the product of all of these numbers. Remember, in one of the questions we were keeping track of the sum, and we created a sum variable. Here we need to keep track of all the products, so you need to create a products variable, assign it 1, because we're multiplying. The initial value should be 1, and then we see products plus equal to, or you can just write is equal to products multiplied by num. So the previous product multiplied by num. If this is 2, if the start value is 2, num becomes 2, and initially prods is 1. So 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. You store that within prods, and you go to the next value, and the same thing happens until at the end you just display system.out.println prods. So this one is display result, calculate product, initialize product prods. Okay, if we check, it should work. Okay, comment. Okay, for loop to calculate products. Okay, that's how you would do for the products. Now for the 7th question, write a method sum of values. This is the method that uses for loop to calculate sum of every third integer from 5 to 60. You're provided with the start value, the stop value, and the step. Okay, so if we write the method public static, and I think you don't need to return anything, you should just display the final value. Okay, public static void sum of values. If you notice, 3 values are provided, so I'll call it int start, int stop, int step. Okay, and then you need to write a for loop. So for int num is equal to start, that's where we're starting. Is it inclusive? Yes, inclusive. So num should be less than or equal to stop, plus num. Okay, here is the change. Now they also gave you something called the step. Step is the one that you will use to increment. So you have to write it this way. Num is equal to num plus step, or you can write it in a short way, which is num plus equal to step. Okay. Now you need to keep track of the sum. So int sum is equal to 0, and then finally display sum, system.out.println sum. But here you need to calculate the sum. So sum is equal to sum plus num. Now calculate the sum, print the sum, store sum, loop to calculate sum. Okay, if you check, your solution must use the word start value and stop value. Okay, start value, stop value, and then stop value. Okay, that's correct. Now use a for loop to display the sequence of odd numbers from the value of a variable called start value to the value of a variable called stop value. The loop counter should be incremented by 1. Okay, the method is already created, that's good. So you need to use a for loop to display all the odd numbers between this value and this value. So you can say for int num is equal to start value. You start from the start value. Is it inclusive? Yes, it is inclusive. So num should be less than or equal to stop value plus num, because you need to increment once every single time, and then you just check if num modulus 2 is not equal to 0. If it is not equal to 0, that means it's odd. If it is equal to 0, that means it's even. So you then just print out the number. Okay, check if odd, print odd value, loop to print all odd values between start and stop values. Okay, now these questions are the ones that you can expect in the exam. Maybe not in the same shape, maybe not in the same stars question, but in another format, but they will be there. So how can we learn how to do these? If I try to teach you logically, I'm sure most of you will not understand. So I'll give you a trick as to how to solve these questions. So the first thing that you need to make sure is the value that you're getting from the parameter, that this value is a positive value. It's not a negative value or 0. So you have to check if in n is the parameter, right, which is the value that you're getting. If n is less than or equal to 0, then you print out for the user invalid input. Okay, so system.out.println invalid input. Otherwise, what we do is we need to print out the stars in this format. If it's 1, you print 1 star. If it's 2, you print 2 rows, okay, and then 2 columns as well. So 1 star in the first column, of the first row, 1 star in the first column of the first row, and 1 star in the second column of the second row. If you notice, it's like this is a row, this is a row, but then these two are a column, okay, and then something here, if it's there, and I don't know how to explain it, but this whole thing is one column, this whole thing is one column, and this whole thing is one column. So now for these kind of questions, you need to use the nested loops, And this is how you would start. You would create a loop to print numbers from 1 to n. Okay, so for int I is equal to 1, I is less than or equal to n plus plus I, and then you print system.out.println. Keep it like this. Okay, nothing within the ln, but for now, because I want you to see, you can see it like this. Okay, so if I click on check, what happens? It prints, if it's 1, it prints 1. If it's 2, it's printing 2 rows for me. If it's 3, it's printing 3 rows for me. If it's 4, it's printing 4 rows. If it's 5, it's printing 5 rows. So now it's printing the rows, but we also need to print the values. So what we do is we copy this loop, okay, and then within this loop you can paste it just before the print statement. Okay, now because it's a nested loop, you can't use I again because you're using I already. In nested loops you can't use same, like if you're creating int I somewhere, you can't create int I again. So you will change this to j everywhere, change it to j, and we're printing stars, right? So use star. So if you now check what happens, it's printing stars, but it's not printing them next to each other. It's printing them it's printing them on new lines. To print them side by side, what you need to do is the print statement within the nested loop, make sure it doesn't have ln. Okay, if you get rid of the n, what happens is now it prints the stars together, but it's printing it. So for example, if it's 2, it's printing 2 stars on both, in all the rows. If it's 3, it's printing 3 stars in all the rows. If it's 4, it's printing 4 stars in all the rows. And it's also printing this random number, which is coming from here because we put I put I just to show it to you. So I'll remove that, check again, and now it's printing stars, but it's not printing the way we want. It's not printing it in a triangle. What you should do here is you're starting from 1. The j is starting from 1. It should go until I. If you do this, it changes the shape to a triangle. If it was n, it will print a square. If you play around with these numbers and changes, you will see that it creates different shapes, and you can expect that in the exam as well, but I'm just showing you if you change it to specific things, how will it work. Okay, now it's printing it the same way that we want it to be. So we check for input validation. This is error. This loop is for printing rows, and this loop is for printing columns. Print stars and then new line. The reason we have this new line is because after printing this, we want to move to the next line. That's the only reason we have the new line. Okay, now if you check, it should be fine. Yes, it's fine. So this is how you would create a triangle. I'll just copy this because I think we need it for the next one. Okay, I want to reset the answer. Okay, so here in this question you need to draw stars, but you have 2 parameters. One which is n, which is how many stars you need, how many rows of stars you need, and then boolean for upside down. If it is upside down, that means you need to display it in the reverse manner. If the upside down is false, you need to display from 1 to 3. If it is true, then you display it from whatever the number is for n until 1. Okay, so how do we do that? Again, I will copy paste this. We don't need this line of code. Move this. Oh, okay, so this is the validation. This is for checking everything. Now let's test what will happen if I use the same code. It will work for the first cases when the upside down variable is false. as soon as it becomes true, it's printing it in the wrong order. So we need to check in the else statement if is upside down equal to false. If it is false, then use the method that we provided earlier. Okay, but if it is true, then in that case you can use the same exact code, but there's one change. When you're printing the rows, when you're printing the stars, which is here, you don't want to start from 1. You want to start from n, okay, and you want to go until 1. And because you're starting from n and you're going back until 1, it's not plus plus anymore, it is now minus minus, because if it is 7 and you want to go back to 1, you need to minus one number every single time, right? And if you start from a bigger number and you're going to a smaller number, the condition will also change. Now j will always be greater than 1. If you just make these 3 changes, it will give you, okay, my bad. This should have not been n, it should have been I, because here, if you look, we had I here and we had 1 here. We just shifted the places. We brought I here and we brought 1 here. We changed the conditions and we changed the increment as well. Now if we check, I think it should work. Why? Oh. Wait, I think I made a mistake. It should be n, because we want, okay, it should be n, because if it is 7, we're printing 7 stars in the beginning. So it should be n, but it shouldn't go to 1, it should go to I. That will be the correct thing. So if we check here, yeah, my bad. It should start from n. Why should it start from n? Because in the beginning we want to print 7 times if this value was 7. If this value was 9, we printed 9 times. But then we want to print it until that. So if this is the first row, we print from 7 to 1. If it's the second row, we print from 7 to 2. If it's the third row, we print from 7 to 3. So it's based on the row. Again, you need to practice this with different variables and different numbers to understand how it's done, but this is kind of the easiest trick that you can use to remember. Alright, so I think that's it for Lab 5A and 5B. 6A and 6B are all available on YouTube. You can watch it there, but they're broken into different parts. I think there are 6A, 6B, 6C, and 6D. You have to find out where is the correct one. But this is for Unit 5. And I would like to repeat that Unit 5 and Unit 6 are really important, so please pay attention to it. And yeah, that's it. All the very best for your exams, and see you in the next one. Bye.